welcome to Unity Spiritual Center, West Texas. We're coming to you live right now from 3952 East 42nd Street in the Santa Fe Square in Suite K1. And this morning, Dr. Ed Rowland, who's a local chiropractor and does several other things, he will be speaking on society and spirituality and reconciling the two, because they don't always go together. And
good morning. It was a little difficult to give a title to my talk today, but it's about beliefs and our lives. The older I get and the longer I live, the more experience I have, the more I learn and the more I see, the more confused I get, and perhaps the more cynical I can become. Life is supposed to be easy and straightforward. As a youth, I was raised with straightforward sureties. You believe in God and the Bible, you obey His commandments, you honor your father and your mother, you obey the law, you fit into society. That was a biggie. You believe in your country, you salute the flag, and you follow your political leaders. I matured in the time of the Vietnam War. I was hardly a war protester. My family and community were all for the war, though, and despite being for it, I certainly wasn't encouraged to enlist. It was a time of great social upheaval and change for America. Even though I was prime fodder for the military, I was protected enough because I was privileged to go to college, at least until I graduated. Then there it was waiting for me. I was drafted. So I made the best of it and enlisted for officer candidate school and became an officer and a gentleman in the United States Army. I was incredibly lucky. We were the first class graduating from OCS not to be sent to Vietnam, so I lucked out, barely. Two of my friends weren't so lucky. One flunked out of college, went there and died. Another graduated as a lieutenant, went there and died. And as a doctor who treats patients for the VA, every week I see patients who are dying from Agent Orange-induced cancers from that war. They're dying from the Vietnam War 50 plus years later. This is in a war where we later learned our president knew we couldn't win, but kept us in it because he couldn't figure a way out without being the first president to just lose a war and be soft on communism. So he kept on killing young men, my friends, for basically his ego. Today, we often wear clothing made in that country, Vietnam, and our biggest banker and supplier of foreign goods is an absolutely communist country, China. So much for serving your country for God and country and politics and fighting communism. Fitting into society in the 50s and early 60s in West Texas required conformity. Oh, there were tolerances, but in retrospect, not that much. I went to Abilene Christian University where God's rules were obvious and strict. We were a select group because we knew the truth and practiced the truth. And everyone else who thought they were Christians and following God's laws weren't, and they were going to hell. Long hair, even shaggy hair, mustaches, and beards were all seen as signs of both suspect political leanings and of being ungodly. Really not just in West Texas, but throughout much of America. And being against this was also seen as being American, and even women wearing pants was considered unpatriotic and ungodly. Yet today, long hair on men, even on far-righters, is really common. I have a far-right female friend who loves long, unkempt beards on men. She calls it the Viking look. And women wear jeans and slacks all the time, including to church, and nobody thinks anything about it. So much for those earlier beliefs being godly and patriotic rules. There's an excellent book written by an Italian investigative journalist that details the funding for America's covert anti-communist operations after World War II up to recent times. Such operations, first carried out in Europe and then in South America, required large sums of cash to fund various black operations and to keep communist or socialist governments out of power. The financial engine behind this was black market drugs, first applied by pharmaceutical firms in Italy and then drug dealers in Laos and Cambodia. The CIA, and this was well known during the Vietnam War by guys in Vietnam, worked in a patriotic, but no, they didn't know all of this. They knew the CIA did drugs. Worked in a unholy triangle of drug growers there, organized crime syndicates to help transport and distribute the drugs in America, and the Vatican Bank to wash the money. The money was used to support dictatorial governments in South America who frequently tortured, imprisoned, and killed their own people. We even overthrew democratically elected governments who had a socialist leaning and installed our own approved dictators. The target of these drugs, by the way, was the American black community. We, our government, helped create our own drug problem. So much for faith in and listening to the government. In the American South, especially the Christian cross, revered as holy, was used as a sign of terror and warning to keep blacks in their place and economically deprived, and from carrying out their constitutional rights to vote, or to have those same rights as those of lighter skin. I never heard a word of commendation about that from my conservative pastors or my conservative friends. So I learned that you just don't listen to what religion, political leaders, and society tells you to do, because that is inextricably tied up in money, politics, and power, or actually money and power. Those are the ruling factors. So if we can't depend upon that as something to base our lives upon, what do we depend upon? Boy, that's the question. We live in politically fractured times. The far right would have us believe that they and only they are the only patriots in the country, and that Christianity and patriotism and right-wing beliefs are all the same, and that anyone who disagrees is un-American and ungodly. Not that the left is immune to criticism, and not that it doesn't have its own deep flaws. I want to talk from a book by Walter Wink called The Powers That Be, Theology for a New Millennium. This information comes from my friend, Presbyterian minister, the Reverend Dr. Janet DeVries. And this is about the gospel and religion. Wink begins with an assertion about the gospel, that it is not a message about the salvation of individuals from the world, but news about a world transfigured right down to its basic structures. For Reverend DeVries, this is a reminder that the life and death of Jesus Christ was not merely about suggesting a new way for individuals to live, but much more broadly a way of ordering human life and its institutions which change the way we think and act. It was not a violent overthrow of Roman authority, but a deliberate way of changing human interactions among people. Wink cannot talk about power without commenting on the violence and the power of violence and nonviolence. That is a preface which you can see and feel. He says, quote, "The myth of redemptive violence is in short, nationalism become absolute. This myth speaks for God. It does not listen for God to speak. It invokes the sovereignty of God as its own, prophetic possibility of radical judgment by God. It misappropriates the language, symbols, and scriptures of Christianity. It does not seek God in order to change. It embraces God in order to prevent change. Its God is not the impartial ruler of all nations, but a tribal God worshipped as an idol. Its metaphor is not the journey, but the fortress. Its symbol is not the cross, but the crosshairs of a gun. Its offer is not forgiveness, but victory. Its good is final elimination. Its salvation is not a new human heart, but a successful foreign policy. It absorbs the revelation of God's purposes for humanity in Jesus. It is blasphemous. It is idolatrous." And so where do we go from here? What do we rely upon? In the end, we have to rely upon our informed selves and on spirit. Being opened and informed is the key. And the key to this is the golden rule. The rule is central and frankly ignored by most religions. and it is central in most religions, even though it's ignored. And this includes much of Christianity. The rule is, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Listening to Spirit with an open mind and heart is the key. Spirit wants you to be aware of your spiritual being. It wants you to be consciously connected to it, and it wants you to live in the spiritual laws of love. What Spirit does not want you to be is separated, unloving, cruel, hateful, greedy, unloving, and dishonest. But Spirit actually doesn't require you to do or be anything. There are things it would prefer you to be, and things it would prefer that you not be, and some things it seriously frowns upon. But there's nothing that it will not let be. Spirit may even assist you in doing what it frowns upon, and then it may say, see, dummy, told you, you didn't want to do that. So the actual choice is up to you. And this is where the golden rule comes in. Support those people who practice the golden rule, not just those people who quote it. Support people who practice the teachings of Jesus in terms of love and inclusion and support and non-judgment. If they use the teachings of Jesus as a weapon and as an absolute and as a way of dividing us from anyone else, don't listen to them. And most importantly, follow informed Spirit and follow the golden rule. And above all, think and listen. And God bless you. Thank you.
Now, I'd like for you to sit, lay down, sit, cross-legged, however is comfortable. Just get comfortable. Keep your back straight. And begin by taking a couple of deep breaths from the belly breath. And one more. On the universe and how we can all be a part of one thing, which basically is kind of what spirituality is. So let's do some hums. Feel that vibration as you continue to do hums. We're here as part of the universe, and we are spiritual beings. We're also human beings, so we have free choice, and we make some bad choices. But let's focus on feeling the oneness and as being one with God and all creation. Let us just be silent with that thought for a couple of minutes. probably notice where in your body you feel discomfort. Your foot, your back, your legs, your arm, your neck, your brain that won't shut up. When you find yourself with a brain that won't shut up, try the arms. Sometimes a singing bowl, you get them, get the sound of a singing bowl from the internet. Give us a good one, but still good. And now we start to come back to the room. Just make small little motions to loosen your neck and your shoulders. Squirm in your seat. Become aware of your body again. Now become aware of the room around you and of people around you. And open your eyes and your back in now. Once again, we'd like to thank you for joining our celebration service. This is brought to you courtesy of Unity Spiritual Center, West Texas. Your generosity makes this live broadcast possible, and then there are also, if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, which would be a great idea, Unity of West Texas, you get the edited video of this message. So please donate today at our website, unityofwesttexas.org, or on Facebook. And join Amazon Smiles and pick us as a charity you support. Thank you again, and may God's light continue to shine through you. Namaste.